During the early days of film, filmmakers would try to think of ways to come up with interesting stories that people would want to watch. And what better stories to tell than those of the not-so-recent past, the Wild West. The very first Western to be created was The Great Train Robbery in 1903. Even though it was only 12 minutes long, The Great Train Robbery showed how cinema could create exciting, action-packed movies. The movie was most notable for having the first close-up scene of a man as he fires his pistol into the camera. As the silent age progressed, so did Westerns. People like William S. Harris and Tom Mix became the go-to guys when you needed a cowboy. With the introduction of sound, Westerns would be able to bring up the suspense to a whole new level. The cowboy that dominated the 1930s was Gene Autry. However, Gene Autry brought more than his Texas swagger to the screen. He was also a very talented musician and singer. Now cowboy movies could have an exciting orchestrated track, followed up with a romantic cowboy love song. However, the formula for the Western hadn't changed. Westerns had almost the exact same storyline. It was starting to get a little old hat. A change would have to be made. The 1960s were here, and it was time for a new formula. The new Westerns were big and exciting. Elmer Bernstein's new musical scores gave the Westerns a sense of grandeur, and this grandeur would need a bigger-than-life cowboy. And that cowboy was John Wayne. John Wayne dominated the Western genre between the late 50s and 60s, even up into the 70s. But the movies also became more gritty. Violence in movies was becoming more accepting. However, due to some leftover rules from the Hays Code, a director was still not allowed to have a scene where a man and another man in the same frame could be shot. They would have to be cut into two separate frames. And thus entered Sergio Leone. Sergio Leone was an Italian director who was unaware of the Hays Code rules. And in 1964, Leone needed an actor for his first Western, A Fistful of Dollars. He acquired a young American actor, Clint Eastwood. Eastwood admits to not telling Leone about the code. This caused the movies to be a major international success and brought Clint Eastwood to international fame. These types of Westerns quickly became known as spaghetti Westerns. But spaghetti Westerns were quite different than the grand American Western. Spaghetti Westerns were dark and gritty, and for the first time in a Western, the protagonist was often an anti-hero. This gave a more realistic approach to the common Western, and audiences loved it. Unfortunately, the Western genre started phasing out in the early 70s, and a new wave of action movies started coming into play. Action movies started taking place in more recent times. However, if you notice closely, action movies kept the same formula as most Westerns. Even in the 80s, movies were still paying homage to the great Westerns of the past.
Joe thinks he's John Wayne, Rambo, Marshall Dillon.
I was always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually.
We are also seeing the rebirth of older, more popular Westerns, like The Magnificent Seven, and the popular HBO TV show, Westworld. In closing, I think it's safe to say that there will always be Westerns in cinemas. They are one of the few genres that have stood the test of time since the beginning of filmmaking, and I believe that they will continue to do so.